Welcome to part 3 of the introduction into developing a Flash game from Indie Game Development. Today we're going to go through angles. Angles are really important in game development because we kind of want to know the relative position of one object to another object. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into mathematics today. We're going to create a function, which I've already done. You can download it from the website. The URL for that is at the end of the movie. I'll also be showing it on the screen to you, so you can copy it if you wish, if you'd rather do that. But the important thing isn't what's inside of the function, it's what it does. And that's what we're going to concentrate on today. Okay, so the function is called angle to object. Angle to object accepts two objects because it wants to know the angle between objects at the source and the destination object, and it then returns a number to you. Inside here is the code which gives us that angle. As you can see from this line, if you're very new to writing this sort of thing, it can maybe look rather confusing. The important part of it that you need to know about is the math.atan2 function. Go onto Wikipedia, take a look at what it says about it. It's all been handled for you by Flash anyway, so don't worry. Okay, I'm just going to leave that on the screen for a little bit. Pause the video, copy it, do what you want to do with it, or go to the website at the end of the video and download the source code for it. We're going to be going through a completely separate series on angles and projection and mathematics outside of this tutorial series because I think it would just get too in depth. What does this function actually do though? I'll just quickly explain with the aid of a picture. As you imagine, this is the ball and this is the mouse. It works out this angle based on these two values and that magical function atan2. Okay, that's it. I'm not going to go any more into maths. You don't need to know any more. Just copy the code. It's what it does that's most important right now. Okay, so what are we trying to do? Well, we're going to try and get the ball that we created before to actually point at the mouse. So we need to have a visual indicator that tells us that that ball is pointing at the mouse. So I've gone back into the ball object we created in the previous tutorial. Remember, it had two frames, a red frame and a green frame, which we flicked between depending on if we had the mouse button down. Well, I want to have a turret on there which will point at the mouse regardless of which state it's in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click on that layer and then insert a new layer. Now, to explain what a layer is imagine a transparent sheet of plastic with some drawings on top of it. You put another transparent sheet of plastic on top of it and you can draw on that, and that's a layer of your animation. So I'm just going to lock the layer below it. You can see there's a little lock symbol here. You can lock each layer so you can't accidentally draw on it. Click into the layer itself and I'm going to just put a square on that. Select it, center it, and using the cursor keys just move it into position. Okay, so now I've got what looks like a turret sticking out the top of my ball. If I run the movie, you can see it's there. And as in the previous tutorial, I can move it around the screen. Okay, back in our code, we want to use this angle to object function to point that ball, which is now a turret, to the mouse. Now, this function has been written so that both the source object and the destination object have the same parameters inside of them, an object being a collection of parameters. You can see here the ball object uses something called the X and Y position to tell it where it is horizontally and vertically on the screen. The same thing is done with the mouse. We say here we've got the mouse X and mouse Y position. But you can see actually you've got a ball object with that inside of it, X and Y. Whereas here you've actually got something that's completely called a different thing. We don't like things like that. So how do we get around that? Well, we have to create an object called mouse object if we want to point it to a mouse. If you don't want to point it to the mouse, that's fine. Chances are, if you're pointing it from one movie clip to another, you'll just take the name of the movie clip and the name of the other movie clip and just pass it into the function. But in this case, we actually have to construct something that mimics a movie clip. Okay, so we've got the mouse object here, and we need to tell it what properties it's got. So we're going to put in 2 curly brackets, and inside there we want 2 parameters. We want an x and a y parameter, so we know the horizontal and the vertical position. So x, we put a colon in, and that tells us we want to put in the value of x afterwards. So we say stage.mousex, as you can see up here, which we've used previously, comma, which tells us we want to put in another parameter, y colon stage.mousey. Okay, so what that's effectively done is it's translated these 2 objects into something that's compatible with the same format as the ball object or a movie clip. So we need to get the angle. Now the function was called angle to object. If we open the brackets, it will tell us what the parameters are that it's wanting, and one of them is the source object. Now in this diagram, which I apologize for showing you again, over here we've got the ball, and that's going to be our source object. So we're going to say ball object. We also need to give it the destination, so what's the angle from the ball object to the mouse, basically. Okay, so that's going to give us the angle back. But we need to assign it to something. We need to tell the ball object that it's moved its position, its angle towards the mouse. So what we can say is ball object dot rotation is equal to the angle that we get back. Okay, that will then rotate the ball object to point at the angle between those 2 objects. If I run that, you can see that as I move the mouse around, it's pointing the turret towards the mouse, which is great because it means we can now move the object around the screen, and the object will follow the mouse, not just in position, but in terms of its orientation towards the mouse. So it's always going to try and point towards the mouse. So if we want to fire a projectile, for example, off in this direction, all we have to do is point the mouse over there and fire. Now, that's all very well, but how do we fire? Well, ideally we'd like to be able to fire by pressing the mouse button down, but guess what? If we press the mouse button down, it moves instead. And that's a problem we're going to have to solve, because it's all very well being able to point to the mouse, but hey, yeah, we have to be able to fire at the same time. So, how do we fix that? Now, the solution needs to be fairly elegant, otherwise, as a game, it will become cumbersome, and really you want to be able to do everything with one click. So, we're going to do some magic. The idea is that if we click on the actual turret, the ball, first, and then move the mouse, then the turret will follow us around. If we don't click on the button on the turret while holding the button down, it'll start firing instead. So just to explain that, if I run this again, if I held my mouse button over here and clicked and moved, we want it to move around the screen, and if I clicked here and started moving, I'd actually want it to be firing in the direction which I'm pointing. So we're going to say, has the ball been clicked? Now, in the previous tutorial we said, is the mouse down? Is the ball clicked? It's been done in a very similar way. In the initialization section we've put is the ball clicked as well as false by default. But what we want to do is, just like when we said, we're clicking down on the stage or the movie clip, we want to do the same thing with the ball. So we'll say ball object dot add event listener mouse event dot mouse down, and we're going to give that a new function called ball mouse down. So effectively this is exactly what we did before in the previous tutorial to be able to interact with the mouse, except what we're going to do now is we're going to trap when we hold the mouse down on the ball object rather than just the entire movie clip. Okay, so we're going to need this function creating. So don't forget we need to have this signature so that we have the right parameters coming in. But actually what we're going to do in here, we're going to say, is the ball clicked? Yes, it is. Now, the interesting thing is, as we're dragging the ball toward the mouse, actually, when we release the mouse, it might not be actually over the ball still. So actually, here, we're going to say, just generically, anywhere on the screen, if you lift the mouse button up, the ball is no longer clicked upon. We can test this works by actually just printing that out to the screen. Remember we talked about the output screen in the previous tutorial. It allows us to check something going on in the background. So if we run this now, you can see we're getting false coming up everywhere because we're not actually clicked on the turret. But then when I hold the mouse button down over it, it became true. I don't even see that now. And then when I let go of it, it became false again. Which is great. That means we actually can tell when the turret's been clicked on or not. So that's great. We now know that we've clicked on the actual turret. So we only want to be able to move the turret. Remember we did this code about moving a turret in tutorial 2. We only want to move it if it's been clicked upon. So let's run that again. So if I'm clicking over here now, the turret doesn't move. If I click on the turret and drag, the turret moves, let go, click over here, could be firing. And that's part of having some elegance in creating the mechanics of the game. Most people don't want to have to click on multiple buttons. They just want one simple button that they can click on to play the game. And by allowing us to click on the actual turret first to move it, to drag it, and then just clicking anywhere else to be able to fire, that allows us only to have one click to be able to manage the entire game. Now, that might be a lot of information all at once. We'll be reviewing a lot of this stuff in later tutorials, so don't worry. But that was the end of tutorial 3. What we've achieved today is the ability to point the turret at the mouse, and we've been able to move the turret around when it's being clicked upon. Hope we'll see you in tutorial 4. Tutorial 4 we're going to be dealing with projectiles and actually firing projectiles around the screen and managing their movement. Thank you.